Today we're learning Perek Gimel Halacha Yud Aleph. Rambam starts off Ketzad Biur Chametz. How is Biur Chametz? Sorrowful, you burn it, or you crumble it, V'zera L'ruach, and throw it to the wind, or Yizerka Le'am, or you throw it into the ocean. Now, the things we're going to discuss are: how do you burn it? Where do you have to take it and make it into crumble it? When is Halacha Rabbi Yosef against Rabbo? When do you burn it according to Rabbi Yehuda? When is Chometz that's not in his Rishus liable for? Chometz that a wall fell on it, how deep does it have to be? Giving Chometz to a goy before the 6th hour, and Hanoah benefit from charcoal of Chometz that was burnt, and the concept that when you burn or create something through a fire that was made from chometz, whether that's considered also or not. So we begin with ketzad. How do you accomplish biur chometz? So if you burn it, or you crumble it, and you throw it to the window, and it would seem when he says oizer liam that he doesn't need to. If he's throwing it into the ocean, he doesn't have to make crumbs out of it. If it would be very solid, the chometz, and the ocean will not cause it to disintegrate right away. He has to crumble it as well before he throws it in, and only then does he throw it into the ocean. The Maggid Mishnah cites that the source is Psachim 21. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein biur chometz el l'scheifer." Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds you must burn it. Chacham disagree. They say you can make it into crumbs and you throw it to the wind or throw it to the ocean. Halacha is like a chachamim, and he says. And the Goinim also agreed with the Rambam, not like Tosfos. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Tosfos in Psachim 27b is the opinion that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. When do you have to take it and crumble it? It brings the suffix of the Gemara in what the Chacham say when they say you make it into crumbs and you throw it to the wind or throw it to the ocean. Does it mean after making it into crumbs you throw it to the wind? And then you throw it to the or throw it to the ocean, or there are two separate actions. You make it into crumbs and throw it to the wind, or you whole and you throw it to the ocean. Rabbi says you always have to crumble it first, and Rabbi Yosef is the opinion only when you throw it to the wind you have to make crumbs out of it, not when you throw it to the water, because the water tends to disintegrate bread. And he asks from a brisa that it says you have to crumble it when you also throw it into the ocean. The Gemara answers that there's a difference whether the bread or the wheat will disintegrate or it's hard. It's a hard crust which won't. Now the chitim that the brisa is talking about do not disintegrate in water. Therefore, you have to crumble them first. And the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yosef because his logic is correct. And he brings down from the Maggid Mishnah that there are those who paskin like Rambam that you always have to crumble any bread that you throw into the ocean. Because the Mishnah says that the Rambam learned from shechitim. When we're talking about these where do you have chometz in the wheat? If water fell on them, do not need to be crumbled. You throw them straight into the water, and we'll go to the next page. And even a whole bag of wheat, if it's thrown in, doesn't have to be crumbled because water separates them and disintegrates them. But bread, you have to crumble because the water doesn't break it up into pieces if it's hard. Even if it's not hard, it's held together by its crust. The Rambam explains the Gemara, we're talking about a very hard chometz that the water does not disintegrate it. The Torah cites the Geonim, so they say like the Chachomim, that you crumble it and throw it to the wind or throw it into the ocean. But the Torah himself is the opinion that even if you throw it into the ocean, you should not throw it in whole. And he cites that the Rambam agrees with him. In other words, he states the same as he does, that you have to make it crumble it first. The Gezer Mishnah says, you cannot say that the words of the Torah, that this is what the Rambam said, goes on what he has written above. That the Rambam says that you don't have to take it and throw it into the ocean. It says, V'imo yochametz kosher, because he continues and he talks about hard chometz that you have to take it apart. So how can you say that he's referring to soft chometz as well? Therefore, he said the Torah is intending to what right when he says that so wrote the Rambam only to the fact that when you throw it to the wind, you have to crumble it, or you throw soft bread into the ocean. Meiser Akir has a question. Because in Mishnah there is a contradiction. He explains, like the Magen Mishnah, that chita, wheat, is a hard chometz that do not disintegrate, and therefore you have to cause it, you have to crumble it before you throw it into the ocean. And by bread, he says you do not have to cause it to crumble because the water will do so. The exact opposite, what he said at the beginning, that chita, a piece of wheat which became chometz because water fell on it, does not need a grain of wheat which water fell on it, does not need to be crumbled because water will take care of itself. Whereas bread needs to be crumbled because water will not cut it. And he brings that Rashi explains the Gemara, the chitim need a type of crumbling different than, in other words, they have to be dispersed as opposed to crumbs, meaning they shouldn't be together. But you should have them floating out on the water and not crumbling. The Meiser Akeach says the Rambam doesn't explain like Rashi, because according to Rashi, bread as well, it would be enough to throw into the water. The Gemara should have said the difference is only between wheat, which has to be spread out, to wheat which is found in a bag, which you have to separate before you throw it in. Furthermore, he asks a question. Pirur crumbling means to make it into crumbs. The actual item, according to Rashi, pirur of wheat means to spread it out and not to make it into finer pieces. And Rashi was aware of this, and therefore he writes that even though it says mefara, even though the Gemara uses the word of crumbling, it means to separate, to spread it. But the Rambam says, who states, if the chometz was hard, he has to crumble it. Understood that it's talking, both situations talking like regarding bread, just like the Kesef Mishnah understood, and we'll go to the next page. Not like the Magen Mishnah, the chometz kosher means wheat. But bread, you don't have to crumble, even though that it could be that the Rambam is of the opinion that both are included because he doesn't mention chitim itself. Now, Meiser Akeach continues. What the Kesef Mishnah says are very difficult to understand because the tool doesn't require crumbling, only for hard bread, which, according to Rabbi Yosef, we're translating now as meaning pieces of kernels of wheat. And he writes that this is the understanding of the Rambam. And the Kesef Mishnah understood in the Rambam that kernels of wheat need to be crumbled because it's hard chometz. So how can the Kesef Mishnah in the beginning say that a wheat that became fermented does not need to be crumbled. So Ma'aser explains that we can push with difficulty and explain that we're talking about the kernels that Rav Yosef is talking to. It doesn't mean that the kernels of Rav Yosef, but rather what Rav Yosef spoke about. They made a difference between bread and wheat, because the Mishnah is of the opinion that chita, kernels of wheat that became chametz, do not need to be crumbled, made into small particles. But whereas bread needs to have that done to it, and the Rambam adds that you only need to crumble the bread when it's hard, and the water will not cause it to fall apart by itself. Rabbeinu Menoach says, one can explain that according to the Rambam, when he throws it into the ocean after he has crumbled it. Crumbling refers both to when you throw it to the wind and when you throw it to the yam, like Rabbah. And he says that can't be, because since the Rambam continues that only hard chametz has to be crumbled. So, and you should not gather it in a sack and throw it into the ocean, but rather you should crumble it and throw it on the water. So he's talking about two different types of throwing into the water. According to Rav Yosef, pure is only said by wheat, not by bread. So why does Rambam mention bread? Rabbeinu Menoach, at the end, he tries to explain the words of the Rambam. If the chametz was hard, he's talking actually about wheat, because that's hard chametz, even though it's not bread. He doesn't mean bread that was hard, but he means kernels of wheat, which are hard, is solid, like the case of Mishnah, even though lefoira, changing the word lefoira to mean to spread out as opposed to crumbling is also difficulty. What is the halacha like Rabbi Yosef neged Rabba? Now we have here machlokes between Rabba and Rabbi Yosef. Rabbeinu Menoach in the case of Mishnah ask why the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yosef. We always say in Baba Basra, when there's a disagreement of Rabbi Yosef, halacha Rabba, and the case of Mishnah says that we have to understand why the Rambam would side the halacha with Rabbi Yosef. Rabbeinu Menoach explains that the Rambam says the disagreements, that's only the disagreements in Baba Basra, which has to do with monetary matters. Aval, but, here we'll change the page, when they disagree elsewhere, in Shas, sometimes the halacha like Rabbi Yosef, and he says that many other Rishonim feel that way as well. The Ma'aser Rakiach cites the Marach Abulafia in Mekroi Kodesh, who answers that this rule, halacha is Tama, is like Rabbah, was not referring when they disagree about what someone said. But here they disagree what the Chachamim are saying, and therefore the Rambam paskins like the interpretation of Rabbi Yosef and the Chachamim. Rabbeinu Menoach continues. In the Gemara, we don't find the halacha whether it's Rabbi or Rabbi Yosef, and some of the Geonim, like Rabbeinu Ephraim, Rabbeinu Yitzchak, Rabbeinu Geyes, are machmir, that whether it's in the Yam HaMelech or any other river or ocean, body of water, whether or not it's hard chometz, meaning wheat, or whether it's not, or soft chometz, you have to crumble it and throw it into the ocean. Agos Maimonides cites that the Rae is of the opinion, like Rabbi Yehuda, that ain't be a chometz al as we mentioned earlier, because the Tana says so in Masechta Tmura. The Mishnah says Elohein an Esrafim in Tmura 33b. These are the things that have to be burnt, and he brings down Truma Tameya, and also Chometz and Pesach. So you see that Chometz and Pesach is burnt like Rabbi Yehuda. When is the time that you burn chametz before, according to Rabbi Yehuda? So we learned, Rabbi Yehuda, when do you burn it? When it's not the time of burning it. So Tosfos explains the name of Rabbeinu Tam, they have Pesach after the 6th hour. But before the 6th hour, when everyone is getting rid of their chametz, you can get rid of it however you want. Meaning, otherwise you wouldn't be able to throw out our garbage. But no, burning is only at the time when it becomes also. Like Maimonides cites Rashi that before the 6th hour you have to burn it specifically. But at the time of the beer, meaning when everyone is burning it, then you can do it however you want. However, Rashi, in our Gemara, the way we see it, writes, Shelo b'shas biur, means the beginning of Tchilas Shesh, the entire 6th hour. That means it's mutter. But b'shas biur means when you go into the 7th hour, then you have to get rid of it, then however you get rid of it, and not the way the Hagos Maimonides understood the words of Rashi. What's chametz that's not in your rishus? The Kesef Mishnah asks, both according to the Torah, who says like Rambam, both according to the Rambam and Paskin like Rabbi Yosef, what is the disagreement of Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachomim? Since when you throw it into the ocean or you throw it to the wind, he took it out of his possession, why does he have to crumble it? He got rid of it. Furthermore, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, not at the time of biur you have to burn it, and at the time when you are not allowed to have it, you can do it with any fashion, form, or shape, not only burning. Why shouldn't it be enough to get rid of it from your possession? And the answer is that even according to the Chacham, there's a difference whether you're talking about a time when you no longer can have it, or you're burning it prior to that time. When you have to burn it, then you have to throw it into the yam, and when it's not the time of biuroi, then you can do it in any fashion. And the difference between its time of burning and not its time of burning is only relating to, and we'll go to the next page, according to Rabbi Yehuda, since the Gemara is referring according to him, and they therefore explain Rabbi Yehuda. But even according to the Chachomim, only from the 6th hour and forward do you need Zrika Leyam. Before that, as long as you take it out of your possession, it's enough. You can make it efker. And he points this out from the Lashon Rambam. Nosli and Nochri, if you gave it to a goy before the 6th hour, you don't have to get rid of it. It's not yours any longer. Why? He means to say that first he throws it to the ruach, and then afterwards, and he wants to get rid of it after the 6th hour, then he has to, according to the Chomim, crumble it and throw it to the ruach, or burn it according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi, not the time of biuroi, that's the 6th hour. And Shas biuro, the time of burning it is the beginning of the 7th hour. Or as according to the Hagos Maimonides, this is the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan only in the 6th hour. However, in the 7th hour, Rabbi Yehuda will also admit, according to the way the Hagos Maimonides understood it, that after that point you can do it in any fashion you want, not only burning. According to Rabbeinu Tam, they disagree in the 6th hour, but in the 7th hour. But in the 6th hour, even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that you can get rid of it in any way. The Kesef Mishnah says it would seem that that's the appropriate situation. He says further, those people who place chametz on the side of the Rishus Rabbim in the 6th hour or the 7th hour, they're not doing properly. Because once the 6th hour has come along, you have to burn it get rid of it, make sure it's burnt. And so it would seem that goes Maimonides. And that's why in those places where they're able to, where it's a Jewish area, and you throw it into the garbage is usually collected before them. Like Os Maimonides says that the Rivak would forbid to throw the chametz in a place of hefker, because we see in Truma If it's anor, you need krufura. It's not enough. Anything that's also anor needs burial. You can't just get rid of it and let it lie around. Let somebody transgress. He brings proof from the Yerushalmi. You should not eat chometz even to dogs. What are we talking about? If he can't eat his own dog, that's for sure. That's how he's benefiting from it. They must be talking even to wild dogs. At the moment that he's obligated to burn it, he cannot benefit from it to give it to dogs. And then when it says you can disintegrate it, that's because the water will cause it to disintegrate completely before the time of the Isra Achilo. However, before the time of the Isra Achilo, he can throw it anywhere that the birds will find it, and since it's not also ba'ano, even though he's not a direct benefit, but nobody's going to benefit from it. And we understand what we learned in Psochem Ches A, 8a, that a chotzer doesn't need bedika, because the ravens need the chometz. And so the Rambam paskins, in the middle of the chotzer you don't need the bedika, because the birds are found there, and they'll eat all the chometz that will fall there. We will stop here, and the second half of the shiur will be in the next portion of the shiur.